After my husband's funeral, I came home to his brother and his ex-wife dragging in suitcases, flashing a forged will. The house and $2 million are ours now, she spat. I didn't argue. I smiled. They thought they won, but they had no idea what was already in motion. The house and $2 million are ours now, Tasha spat, her red lacquered nails tapping against the document she'd triumphantly slapped onto the coffee table. I didn't argue. I simply smiled. The kind of smile that would have warned them had they known me at all. But they didn't know me. They never had. 3 hours after we lowered my husband into the ground, I stood in my own living room watching James's brother Victor and his ex-wife drag suitcases across my hardwood floors. The audacity shouldn't have surprised me. Nothing about vultures should surprise anyone. The funeral had been a performance worthy of Broadway. Victor, dressed in an impeccably tailored black suit that James had actually paid for last Christmas, had wept on cue. His shoulders heaved dramatically whenever someone important approached. The CEO of James's company, our attorney, wealthy investors who had backed my husband's vision. I watched from behind my veil as Victor clutched their hands, voice breaking with fabricated grief while his eyes remained calculating, cold. Tasha had kept to the periphery, a shadow in designer black, her presence raising eyebrows among those who remembered the vicious divorce 6 years ago. She'd strategically positioned herself beneath a large oak tree, seemingly respectful in her distance but close enough to document who attended, who mattered, who controlled what pieces of James's legacy. When she thought no one was looking, I caught her checking her watch 3 times during the eulogy. We've already moved some things to make space, Victor announced, interrupting my thoughts as he casually moved a framed photo of James and me in Santorini from the mantel, replacing it with some hideous crystal sculpture Tasha had produced from her luggage. You'll want to pack quickly. Our movers arrive tomorrow morning. Tomorrow? I echoed, my voice impressively steady despite the rage building behind my ribcage. That's rather efficient. No point dragging this out, Tasha replied, already inspecting the kitchen cabinets. Is this real Wedgwood? I always told James he had surprisingly good taste for someone so focused on code and computers. I watched her fingers stroke the china James's grandmother had left him, pieces I had carefully unpacked and arranged when we first moved in. Pieces that held memories of anniversary dinners and quiet Sunday breakfasts. May I see the will? I asked, extending my hand with practiced calm. Victor exchanged a quick glance with Tasha before retrieving the document from the coffee table. It's all perfectly legal, he insisted too quickly. James came to his senses about certain things before the end. The paper felt heavy in my hands, weighted with their betrayal. My eyes scanned the document, noting immediately what they hoped I wouldn't catch: subtle inconsistencies in James's signature. After 15 years of marriage, I had seen my husband sign thousands of documents. The pressure points were wrong. The J slanted at an angle James never used. The loop on the final S closed completely, something my meticulous husband never did. 3 months earlier, James had called me into his study late one night, his face gaunt from treatments that were failing to stop the cancer's progression. Victor came by the office today, he'd said, voice barely above a whisper. Asked about access to the secure servers. Said he wanted to help organize my affairs given the circumstances. That night marked the beginning of my quiet investigation. James had been too weak to pursue his suspicions, but I wasn't. My background in forensic accounting, a career I'd set aside when we married, provided skills perfectly suited for tracking the digital breadcrumbs Victor didn't know he was leaving. Elena. Victor prompted, impatience creeping into his tone. Did you hear me? We need you to acknowledge receipt of the formal notice. I blinked, focusing back on their expectant faces. Of course. Just processing everything. I carefully refolded the document, buying myself precious seconds. I assume you'll want the master bedroom? The question caught them off guard. They'd prepared for hysterics, for legal threats, for the emotional breakdown of a grieving widow. My acquiescence visibly unsettled them. Yes, Tasha answered cautiously. Though we might renovate. James always had such conventional taste. Except in technology, Victor added quickly. Speaking of which, did he happen to mention where he kept his home backups? For his work files. Just trying to make sure his legacy is properly preserved. And there it was, the true purpose behind the forged will, the rushed eviction, the theatrical grief. James had developed a revolutionary AI architecture in the months before his diagnosis, a system that could revolutionize predictive algorithms across dozens of industries. The patents alone were worth millions, but the proprietary code was the real prize. I wouldn't know about that, I lied smoothly. James kept his work life separate from home. 1 week after James had shared his suspicions, I had discovered the hidden room. What appeared to be an ordinary bookcase in his study concealed a sliding panel, revealed only when 3 specific books were pulled in sequence. Inside, I found a compact workspace containing encrypted hard drives, multiple monitors, and documentation that confirmed everything. Tasha had re-established contact with Victor shortly after James's diagnosis became known in industry circles. Her new employer, a direct competitor to my husband's company, had orchestrated the entire reconciliation. "I'll need tonight to pack some essentials," I said, moving toward the stairs. "If you don't mind." "Of course not," Victor replied with false magnanimity. "Take what's personally yours. Nothing more." In our bedroom, soon to be their bedroom, I locked the door and moved efficiently, selecting only what I genuinely needed. Clothes, toiletries, the journals James had kept during his illness. From the hidden safe behind our closet mirror, I retrieved passports, birth certificates, and the small jade elephant James had given me on our first anniversary. Everything else was replaceable. Everything else was just backdrop to the scene I was carefully setting. Before leaving, I accessed the hidden room one final time, activating the dormant security system James had installed throughout our home. Every room began silent recording, creating backups to multiple secure servers. Within seconds, my phone received confirmation. Full surveillance was live and transmitting. Downstairs, Victor and Tasha had already opened a bottle of James's favorite whiskey, 60-year-old Macallan we'd been saving for his remission celebration. They didn't bother to hide their glasses as I descended with my single suitcase. "I'll be staying with Maggie for now," I announced calmly. "I should be fully moved out by tomorrow evening." Victor raised his glass in mock salute. "To smooth transitions and new beginnings," Tasha added with a predatory smile. I nodded, turning toward the door before allowing myself a final comment. James always said everything happens for a reason. I'm starting to believe he was right. Outside, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the lawn as I loaded my suitcase into the car. From my phone, I could already see the live feed from the living room. Victor and Tasha clinking glasses, laughing, her hand sliding possessively over furniture that still held the imprint of my life with James. They thought they had won everything. They had no idea what was already in motion. Driving away from the house felt like leaving a piece of myself behind, but I knew better than to look back again. I kept my eyes focused on the road ahead, one hand on the steering wheel, the other clutching my phone as the live surveillance feed continued to stream. Tasha was already redecorating in her mind, pointing dramatically at walls and fixtures with disdain, while Victor nodded along, his attention clearly elsewhere. I arrived at Maggie's modest townhouse to find her waiting on the porch, arms crossed, fury evident in her stance. "Tell me you aren't actually letting those parasites take everything," she demanded as I stepped out of the car. "Not here," I whispered, embracing her tightly. "The walls have ears." 20 minutes later, we sat in her kitchen as I showed her the feed on my phone. Victor was now examining the bookshelf in James's study, running his fingers along the spines with growing impatience. "He knows something's there," I explained, sipping the strong coffee Maggie had prepared. "James mentioned the hidden room to him once when they were teenagers. He's been obsessed with finding it ever since." "Will he find it?" Maggie asked. I allowed myself a small smile. "Not without the correct sequence. And even if he stumbled upon it by sheer luck, he'd find nothing but empty drives now." On screen, Victor had abandoned the bookshelf and moved to the large painting that concealed James's wall safe. Unlike the hidden room, the safe wasn't particularly secretive. Most visitors assumed it contained valuables or important documents. Victor spun the dial with practiced precision. Clearly, he'd watched James open it before. "He knows the combination," Maggie noted with alarm. "James changed it 3 months ago," I replied calmly. "But I changed it again last week to the one code Victor would eventually try, James's birthday." The moment arrived faster than I anticipated. After several frustrated attempts, Victor's face brightened as the safe door swung open. His expression quickly soured as he reached inside to find only a single flash drive nestled in the otherwise empty compartment. He held it up triumphantly for Tasha, who had appeared in the doorway. "Is that it?" she asked, disappointment evident in her voice. "Where are the certificates? The backup drives? The prototype specifications?" "This has to be it," Victor insisted, pocketing the drive. "Let's check his laptop." I switched camera views on my phone, following them to the master bedroom where James's personal laptop remained on his desk. Victor connected the flash drive, fingers tapping impatiently as he waited for it to load. "What's on it?" Maggie whispered. "Nothing they can use," I replied. "But everything we need." The screen showed Victor's growing frustration as windows of encrypted code filled the monitor, each attempt to access files meeting security protocols that triggered additional encryption layers. What he didn't realize was that each failed attempt was simultaneously documented and transmitted to a secure server, building evidence of their intentions. "I need to go," I said, standing abruptly. "There's something I need to check on." Maggie frowned. "You're not staying here?" "That's what they expect," I explained, gathering my suitcase. "But James prepared for this possibility long before he got sick. There's an apartment in Westview Towers purchased through one of his shell companies. They can't trace it to either of us." The apartment was small but perfectly equipped, a minimalist space with state-of-the-art security and enhanced internet connectivity. The living room wall displayed 6 large monitors showing different areas of our home. I settled at the desk, connecting my laptop to expand my surveillance capabilities. By evening, Victor and Tasha's exploration had turned frantic. The camera in the master bathroom captured Tasha attempting to pry open floor tiles, convinced James had hidden valuables beneath them. In the basement, Victor repeatedly tried different code combinations on the server room door, growing increasingly agitated with each failure. "Access denied," the security system announced in its artificial voice, a feature James had disabled years ago that I'd reactivated remotely. Victor kicked the door in frustration, leaving a dent that only triggered another security alert. The most satisfying moment came shortly after midnight when Tasha attempted to leave for cigarettes. The garage door opened obligingly as she backed her luxury SUV toward it, then abruptly closed when her vehicle was halfway through. After 3 identical attempts, she abandoned the garage entirely, opting for the front door, which mysteriously locked behind her, leaving her key ineffective upon return. Victor had to let her in, their heated whispers about faulty wiring and old house problems, bringing me unexpected comfort as I prepared for bed in my sparse new accommodation. Morning brought the first real crack in their alliance. Victor's phone call to James's bank revealed the harsh truth I'd been anticipating. The accounts mentioned in the forged will contained barely $84,000 combined, not the millions they'd expected. "This is impossible," Victor shouted, pacing the kitchen while Tasha sat stone-faced at the island. "James was worth at least $8 million. The company valuation alone." "Maybe he moved it," Tasha suggested, her calm demeanor barely masking her panic. "Offshore accounts. Trust funds. There has to be an explanation." "Or we've been played," Victor growled, slamming his fist on the counter. "What if Elena knew about this? What if she's been pretending to be clueless this whole time?" I smiled at the monitor, simultaneously typing an anonymous email to James's bank flagging suspicious activities on his accounts. The security department would investigate any unusual access attempts, like Victor's call this morning using James's personal information. My next task involved activating Phase 1 of James's home automation system, a sophisticated network he'd installed primarily for convenience but that could be repurposed for my needs. Lights began behaving erratically throughout the house, dimming during important conversations, brightening suddenly when either of them mentioned anything related to James's work. The climate control system required more delicate manipulation, subtle temperature changes making the master bedroom uncomfortably warm while keeping the study unusually cold. Small discomforts designed to fray nerves already stretched thin by disappointment. By afternoon, the first serious argument erupted in the living room. Tasha accused Victor of misleading her about James's assets, while Victor suggested she'd been working her own angle all along. "I gave up a perfectly good position at Meridian Systems for this," she hissed, gesturing around the house. "I can't go back now. They know exactly why I left." "That's your problem," Victor retorted. I told you what I knew based on financial statements from last year. Something's changed. Someone moved the money. We need to find that hidden office, Tasha insisted. You said it exists. Somewhere in this house is everything we need. The prototype alone would be worth millions to the right buyer. Their candid admission of intentions recorded perfectly for later use. I leaned back in my chair, allowing myself a moment of grim satisfaction. James had always said the best revenge required patience, intelligence, and allowing your enemies to destroy themselves. From my vantage point in the apartment no one knew existed, I watched the house slowly turn against them, becoming as much my ally in this chess game as James himself had been in planning it. They had no idea what they couldn't see, but they would. Soon enough they would see everything. 3 days into their occupation, Victor made his first serious attempt to access James's private study. The main study was accessible to anyone, of course. The room where James entertained colleagues and conducted video conferences. But the inner sanctum, the space where my husband had done his most innovative work, remained hidden despite their increasingly desperate search. I watched Victor on my monitors, methodically tapping the wooden panels along the east wall of the study. James had mentioned once, after too many glasses of wine at a family gathering years ago, that he kept his most valuable work behind the walls. Victor had clearly remembered and was determined to find the entrance. What he didn't know was that James had installed pressure sensors throughout the paneling. Certain patterns of taps would trigger different security responses. Random tapping would do nothing, but a specific rhythm, one Victor was inadvertently creating as he worked his way along the wall, would activate what James had playfully called the timeout room. Come on, Victor muttered, his frustration evident as he pressed harder against the wooden panels. It has to be. The click was barely audible through my speakers, but Victor's triumphant expression told me he'd heard it. The panel slid sideways, revealing a small anteroom, not the main hidden office, but a security checkpoint James had designed specifically for uninvited guests. Victor stepped inside eagerly, the motion sensors tracking his movement. 3 seconds later, the panel slid shut behind him with a definitive thunk. What the? Victor spun around, pushing against the now sealed entrance. Tasha, he called, banging on the wall. Tasha. But Tasha was 2 floors away, trying different combinations on our bedroom safe, completely unaware of Victor's predicament. The anteroom was soundproofed, another of James's precautions. Victor pulled out his phone, his face falling as he registered the absence of signal. He paced the small space, examining the featureless walls for any control panel or emergency release. Finding none, he eventually sat on the single chair in the center of the room, defeated. James had designed the timeout room with unexpected visitors in mind. It contained no dangerous elements. Air circulated freely, the temperature remained comfortable, and a small water dispenser provided hydration. But it was programmed to remain sealed for 6 hours once triggered, resetting the countdown with each attempt to force exit. I watched Victor's growing panic with a strange detachment. He checked his watch repeatedly, tried his phone from different positions, even attempted to pry the panel open with his house keys. Each effort proved futile. When Tasha finally realized Victor was missing, nearly 2 hours had passed. I observed her increasingly frantic search through the house, calling his name with growing irritation. She never thought to check the study until almost dinner time, and even then she had no way of knowing he was sealed inside the wall. By hour 5, Victor had moved through rage, desperation, and resignation. He sat motionless in the chair, staring blankly at the wall. When the panel finally slid open automatically, Tasha had long since given up searching and was nursing a glass of wine in the kitchen. Victor emerged shaken, disoriented by the experience and furious at what he perceived as a deliberate trap. His suspicions weren't entirely wrong. Something's not right about this house, he declared to Tasha later that evening, his voice carrying clearly through the kitchen monitors. It's like it's working against us. Tasha dismissed his concerns as paranoia, but I noticed she eyed the ceiling corners after that, searching for cameras she couldn't see. James had been thorough in concealing the surveillance system, embedding tiny lenses within light fixtures and air vents. The following morning brought Tasha's true skills into focus. While Victor slept off his ordeal, she set up sophisticated equipment I recognized from my research into her background. Hardware designed to penetrate secure networks and bypass conventional firewalls. I watched with grim satisfaction as she connected her devices to our home network, confident in her abilities yet unaware of the defensive mechanisms James had implemented. Within 30 minutes, warning alerts flashed across my screens. Tasha had triggered the network's security protocols. The counterattack was silent but devastating. Rather than simply blocking her, James's system allowed limited access while corrupting her equipment with targeted malware. Each of her probing attempts was logged, documented, and traced back to her previous employer, building a comprehensive record of corporate espionage attempts. My phone chimed with messages from the automated security system, detailing each breach attempt and countermeasure deployed. I forwarded the most damning evidence to my private email, adding to the growing file against them. That night I initiated the first real psychological offensive. At precisely 2:17 a.m., when both were finally asleep, I activated the house's integrated speaker system. James's voice, collected from various home videos and recordings, echoed softly through the master bedroom. "The security protocol has been breached," his disembodied voice announced calmly. "Initiating countermeasures against unauthorized access." Victor bolted upright, flipping on lights while Tasha remained frozen in bed, eyes wide with genuine fear. "What was that?" she whispered. "Was that?" "It sounded like James," Victor confirmed, his voice unsteady. "Some kind of automated message." I played another clip 20 minutes later, just as they'd convinced themselves it was a dream or technical glitch. "All attempts to access secure files have been logged and reported," James's voice stated matter-of-factly. "IP addresses and methods have been documented." Their relationship deteriorated rapidly after that night. Breakfast the next morning devolved into accusations, with Tasha questioning Victor's competence and Victor insinuating that Tasha's technical expertise must be exaggerated if she couldn't even access basic files. "You said this would be simple," she hissed, slamming her coffee mug down. "A grieving widow, distracted and emotional. A straightforward will execution. Where's the money, Victor? Where are the research files your brother supposedly kept here? Maybe if you were actually as skilled as Meridian thought you were, we'd have answers by now," Victor shot back. By week's end they were sleeping in separate rooms. Victor took the master bedroom while Tasha claimed the guest suite, their united front crumbling under the weight of frustration and suspicion. I documented everything methodically, creating timestamps and saving video clips of their most incriminating conversations. When they attempted to forge my signature on additional bank documents, amateurishly on the dining room table in full view of a hidden camera, I forwarded the footage to Michael Kane, a private investigator who had been my colleague before I left the accounting firm. "This is better than I expected," Michael commented during our secure video call. "They're doing all the work for us." "They're getting desperate," I replied, watching Victor pace the living room on my secondary monitor. "The house is becoming their prison." Michael's laugh carried a predatory edge. "A prison of their own making. Your husband was a genius." "Yes," I agreed, fingering the jade elephant pendant I hadn't removed since James gave it to me. "He knew them better than they knew themselves." The house that knew too much was slowly revealing their secrets, one surveillance clip at a time. The 10th day brought a breakthrough, at least Victor thought so. While ransacking James's closet for the third time, he discovered a hidden compartment beneath the false bottom of an old humidor. His triumphant shout echoed through the surveillance system as he held up a sleek external hard drive, its metallic surface gleaming under the bedroom lights. "Tasha, get in here," he called, already connecting it to his laptop. "I found something." I leaned forward in my chair, anticipation tightening my chest. The drive had been James's idea, a honeypot designed to lure exactly this type of intrusion. I'd planted it 3 days before the funeral, sliding it into the hiding spot I knew Victor would eventually discover. Tasha appeared in the doorway, her initial excitement fading to caution. "Wait," she said, reaching toward the laptop. "We should scan it first. It could be." "It's fine," Victor dismissed, already clicking through folders labeled with promising titles. Investor representatives, patent face. The tracking software installed silently in the background, designed to remain undetectable by standard security programs. Within seconds, it began transmitting data from Victor's laptop to my secure server. His contacts, emails, text messages, browsing history, and most importantly his communications with Tasha's employer Axiom Technologies, James's chief competitor. "These are encrypted," Victor growled, clicking frantically through files that appeared complete but remained inaccessible. Maybe your technical expertise might actually be useful now. Tasha's expression soured, but she took his place at the laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. These are sophisticated encryption protocols, she muttered. But I might be able to. She worked for hours while Victor paced behind her. By evening, her frustration was palpable. I need specialized equipment, she finally admitted. This isn't something I can crack with basic tools. Then call your people, Victor snapped. That's why they sent you, isn't it? To get exactly this kind of information. The slip confirmed what I already suspected. Victor knew about Tasha's connection to Axiom. He wasn't just her unwitting accomplice. He was an active participant in the corporate espionage. Later that night, while Victor slept, Tasha made the call I'd been waiting for. She moved to the garden patio, clearly believing she was beyond the house's surveillance range. He was wrong. It's me, she said quietly, her back to the hidden camera in the porch light. Yes, I'm still here. No, it's not going as planned. She paused, listening to someone on the other end. The widow moved out immediately, too quickly. Like she knew what was coming. Another pause. We found a hard drive, but it's encrypted beyond anything I can handle remotely. No, I can't remove it from the premises. There's some kind of tracking protocol embedded in the house systems. She glanced nervously over her shoulder. Something's not right about this place. The security is. It's like it's adaptive. The voice on the other end must have expressed displeasure, because Tasha's posture stiffened defensively. I'm doing everything I can. Victor is becoming unstable, paranoid. He thinks the house is watching us. She lowered her voice further. I need extraction. This mission is compromised. When she returned inside, I triggered the next phase of escalation. The house's security system activated without warning. Lights flashing, alarms blaring, every door and window in the south wing locking simultaneously. Tasha froze in the hallway, terror evident on her face as automated announcements echoed through the house. Security breach detected. Containment protocols engaged. Victor emerged from the bedroom wild-eyed and disheveled. What did you do? He shouted at Tasha over the alarms. Nothing. I was just outside getting some air. The system deactivated as abruptly as it had started, leaving them shaken in the sudden silence. Neither slept for the remainder of the night. The following morning, Victor announced his plan to generate cash by selling some of James's art collection. Specifically, 3 abstract paintings in the dining room that James had purchased as investments. These are worth at least $500,000 each, he told Tasha confidently. I've already contacted a buyer who doesn't ask questions. I watched him carefully remove the first painting, a large Rothko-inspired piece that James had particularly loved. Victor wrapped it carefully in blankets, oblivious to the fact that he was handling a replica. James and I had moved the originals to secure storage 2 months earlier, replacing them with sophisticated reproductions that would fool anyone but a professional appraiser. Victor's buyer arrived that afternoon, a nervous man in an ill-fitting suit who examined the painting with a loupe and ultraviolet light. His frown deepened with each test. This is a reproduction, he finally announced. A good one, but definitely not authentic. That's impossible, Victor insisted, unwrapping the second painting. My brother collected originals. He authenticated them himself. The buyer examined all 3 with the same result. Someone switched them, he concluded, packing his tools. Happens more often than you'd think. Rich guy dies, staff gets ideas. He shrugged apologetically. I can't make an offer on reproductions no matter how good they are. After he left, Victor's rage was spectacular. He tore through the house, checking every painting and valuable object, finding similar substitutions throughout. The Ming Dynasty vase in the foyer? Replica. The signed first edition books in the library? Clever forgeries with photocopied signatures. She did this, he seethed, pacing the living room while Tasha watched warily from the doorway. Elena knew we were coming. She prepared for this. How could she have known? Tasha asked carefully. Victor spun toward her, suspicion dawning in his eyes. Unless someone told her. Unless someone warned her about our plan. The accusation hung in the air between them. Don't be ridiculous, Tasha scoffed, but her eyes darted toward the stairs. toward her packed suitcase I had observed her preparing earlier. That night the house turned hostile in earnest. The temperature in Victor's bedroom rose to nearly 90 degrees while Tasha's plummeted to a frigid 55. The water pipes groaned ominously whenever either of them tried to shower. Lights flickered during conversations but stabilized when they fell silent. By morning, Tasha had made her decision. I watched her methodically collect her equipment, downloading what little data she had managed to extract from the household systems onto a portable drive. She placed a brief call to a burner phone, requesting extraction in coded language that my surveillance system flagged and decoded instantly. She waited until Victor left for a meeting with the attorney, another dead end I had arranged, before wheeling her suitcase to the front door. But I had anticipated this moment. As she reached for the handle, I activated the estate's complete lockdown protocol from my remote station. Metal shutters slid silently over every window. Reinforced bolts engaged in every external door. The house transformed from passive observer to active prison in less than 30 seconds. Tasha's confusion turned to panic as she tried door after door, finding each one immovable. She ran to the garage, hitting the emergency release for the main door, only to discover that it too had been overridden. She was still frantically searching for an exit when Victor's car pulled into the driveway. Through the security camera, I watched him stare in confusion at the house's transformed exterior, the metal shutters, the reinforced entry points. When he finally gained entry through the one door I deliberately left accessible, he found Tasha surrounded by her packed bags and technical equipment in the foyer. "Going somewhere?" he asked, his voice dangerously soft as he took in the portable drive in her hand and the Axiom Technologies badge she had foolishly left visible in her open purse. The walls had finally closed in. Tasha's hand froze on the portable drive as Victor stepped fully into the foyer, his shadow stretching across the marble tiles between them. "I can explain," she stammered, her usual composure shattering under his murderous glare. "Axiom Technologies," Victor said slowly, picking up the badge from her purse. "Were you working for them the entire time? Even during your marriage to James?" I watched their confrontation unfold across my monitors, the camera angles capturing every nuance of their breakdown. The perfect moment had arrived. I closed my laptop, gathered the extensive files I'd compiled and texted Michael, "It's time." 20 minutes later, I sat in the back of a sleek town car heading toward the house, flanked by Margaret Winters, James's longtime attorney, and Philip Rowland, the executor of the actual will. In my lap rested a leather portfolio containing everything needed to end this game permanently. "Are you certain you want to do this in person?" Margaret asked, her silver hair catching the afternoon light. "We could send the security team first." "No," I replied firmly. "I want to see their faces." When our car pulled into the driveway, Victor and Tasha were still locked in heated confrontation, their argument having escalated throughout the house. The security cameras showed them in the kitchen now, Victor backing Tasha against the refrigerator, her technical equipment scattered across the counter between them. I deactivated the lockdown protocol with a few taps on my phone, allowing the front door to unlock with an audible click that carried through the speakers. The sound stopped their argument instantly, both heads turning toward the entryway. "Someone's here," Tasha whispered, fear evident in her voice. I stepped across the threshold of my home for the first time in 2 weeks, the familiar scent of lemon polish and James's favorite sandalwood incense still lingering despite their occupation. Margaret and Philip followed, their formal attire and stern expressions adding gravitas to our entrance. "Hello, Victor," I called, my voice echoing through the foyer. "Tasha, I believe we need to talk." Their appearance when they emerged from the kitchen told the story of my success. Victor's once immaculate shirt was wrinkled and stained, his face haggard from sleepless nights. Tasha's designer outfit had been replaced by rumpled loungewear, her hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail rather than her usual perfect styling. "What are you doing here?" Victor demanded, attempting to regain control despite his obvious discomfort. "This is our house now." "Is it?" I motioned toward the living room. "Let's discuss that, shall we?" Something in my confident tone must have unsettled them. They followed hesitantly, exchanging wary glances as we settled into the seating area. I took James's favorite chair, a position of power I deliberately avoided during our marriage but now claimed without hesitation. "You've met Margaret, James's attorney," I began conversationally. And this is Philip Rowland, the executor of James's estate. His actual estate. Margaret opened her briefcase, removing a document bound in blue leather. This is the last will and testament of James Elliot Sullivan, properly witnessed and notarized 6 months ago. That's impossible, Victor interjected. We have the will right here. He gestured toward the forged document still lying on the coffee table. You have a forgery, Philip corrected, his voice carrying the weight of his 30 years in financial law. Quite a good one, but ultimately meaningless since all assets in question were already transferred before James's death. I savored their confusion, the dawning horror in their expressions as Margaret continued her explanation. 6 months before his diagnosis, James established an irrevocable trust with Elena as the sole trustee. The house, his patents, the research, the investment accounts, everything was moved into this entity. She slid the document across the table. The James and Elena Sullivan Living Trust. Quite thorough, quite legal, and quite impossible to challenge. You're lying, Tasha hissed, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her uncertainty. In response, I opened my portfolio and removed a stack of surveillance photos. Victor accessing James's private files, Tasha on the phone with her Axiom handler, both of them attempting to forge documents at our dining room table. The house has been watching you, I said simply. Every conversation, every attempted theft, every act of corporate espionage, all documented and time-stamped. Victor lunged forward suddenly, his control finally snapping as he reached for my throat. You manipulative. Before his hands could touch me, a side door opened and 2 security personnel in plain clothes stepped into the room. A third emerged from behind the curtains and a fourth appeared at the top of the stairs. Victor froze, suddenly aware that we hadn't been alone at any point. These gentlemen have been in the house for the past 3 days, I explained calmly. Another layer of protection James insisted upon once we realized what you were planning. How? Tasha whispered, genuine bewilderment crossing her face. How did you know? James knew his brother, I replied simply. And I knew my husband. When his diagnosis became terminal, we anticipated vultures. We just didn't expect family to lead the flock. Margaret placed 2 folders on the table, one red, one blue. You have 2 options, she stated professionally. The red folder contains comprehensive confessions to attempted fraud, breaking and entering, and corporate espionage, along with non-disclosure agreements. Sign them and you disappear. No public charges, no prison, just permanent exile from this family and industry. And the blue folder? Victor asked, his voice barely audible. Contains the evidence we'll provide to the district attorney, Axiom's board of directors, and the Technology Ethics Committee, Philip explained. I estimate minimum sentences of 15 years, given the calculated nature of your scheme and the evidence of premeditation. The room fell silent as the magnitude of their failure settled around them. Everything they had attempted had been anticipated, countered, and documented. Every move in their game had been observed by the invisible queen they had underestimated from the beginning. You have 30 minutes to decide, I said, standing. I'll be in James's study. As I walked away, I heard Tasha's broken whisper to Victor. She planned this from the start. We never had a chance. In the privacy of the study, I finally allowed myself to grieve, not just for James, but for the family he had wanted to believe in despite evidence to the contrary. For the brother who had envied rather than loved him. For the legacy that had attracted predators instead of protectors. When Margaret knocked softly 28 minutes later, I had composed myself again. They've signed the red folder, she informed me. The security team is escorting them to separate vehicles. I nodded, relief washing through me. And the house. As specified in the trust, it remains yours, along with all assets and research materials. After they departed, I moved through the empty rooms, reconnecting with the space that had witnessed both the happiest and most painful moments of my life. The silence felt cleansing after weeks of their invasive presence. In the basement, I pressed the sequence of panels that revealed the entrance to James's true sanctuary, the laboratory none of them had managed to discover. The door slid open, lights activating automatically as I stepped inside. The main console hummed to life, multiple screens displaying the progress of James's groundbreaking AI research. The neural framework that could revolutionize everything from medical diagnostics to climate modeling. His true legacy, now safe in the hands of the only person he had trusted completely. My phone chimed with a message from the security team. Subject V delivered to international terminal with one-way ticket to Singapore. Subject T en route to private airfield for chartered departure to Berlin. Both escorts confirm compliance with non-return agreements. I set the phone down and turned to the main keyboard, entering the access code James had created for me. The system responded immediately. Welcome, Elena. Project continuity awaiting your command. James had always said that chess wasn't about capturing the king. It was about controlling the board so completely that checkmate became inevitable long before the final move. He would have appreciated the elegance of this victory, achieved not through confrontation but through patience, intelligence, and the power of being perpetually underestimated. The queen had taken the board exactly as we had planned. If this story of sweet revenge kept you hooked, hit that like button now. I loved when Elena watched Victor panic in that locked room for 6 hours. What was your favorite part? Tell me in the comments below. Want more stories where the smart, quiet person wins in the end? Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss out. Remember, sometimes the person others underestimate is the most dangerous one in the room.